The Conservative Party of Canada just had a major upset victory in a Toronto by-election, meaning Justin Trudeau needs to figure out what the hell he's going to do. So, in this video, I'll break down this result. I will showcase maybe as to why, or some information behind why the Liberals are doing terribly right now, but also just get to this decision that Trudeau has to make, that he is taking much too long to make if he hopes to avoid a Conservative majority government. First off, the result here. This is the Toronto St. Paul by-election. Don Stewart winning with 42.1% of the vote as the Conservative candidate to Leslie Church, the Liberal candidate, at 40.5%. So Leslie Church was a new candidate in the race. The previous holder of this seat, Liberal MP Carolyn Bennett, had recently stepped down to become the ambassador to Denmark. So Leslie Church took over, and Church is the former chief of staff to Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, whereas Don Stewart is a former financial and investment advisor on Bay Street. Two candidates of money. Which, look, this isn't new to either the Liberals or the Conservatives, but I just find it hilarious that both of these parties really try to speak to working class issues and pretend they care, and continually put up candidates like this that are historically either, establishment candidates like the former chief of staff of Chrystia Freeland, or a financial advisor from Bay Street. Like Pier PV is running on a message of working class values. He cares so much about the working class, and their candidate for this race is a Bay Street guy. So I'll get to a little more on that on Pier PV in a minute here. But so the turnout for this by-election was 43.52%, which of course is low, but it is a by-election, so it's expected to be lower than a typical turnout for a federal election. So I looked it up. The last election in 2021, the turnout there was 65.48%. So much higher before. But regardless, I still think this is, fairly high for a by-election. It's almost half the constituency here voting. Still pretty strong of a turnout for an election like this. But some reactions here. So this is from a liberal strategist, Scott Reed. There is no language too hyperbolic to describe the significance of this failure. Again, going to how historic this is. Robert Benzie, who, just to get his proper title here, Queen's Park Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star, writing, if you went to bed last night, you were waking up to one of the biggest by-election upsets in Canadian history. A stunning win by the Tories is one of the safest Liberal seats in the country. This is an example of what is very likely to come if Justin Trudeau remains the Liberal leader and, by extension, the Prime Minister. This is from David Coletto of, I believe, Abacus Data. Yes, Abacus Data. Writing here, Toronto St. Paul's by-election, a swing big enough to wipe out 55 Liberal seats in Ontario. Some analysis from me with data from Eric Grenier. So I will link to his Substack, by the way, below in case you want to dive deeper into this. But if you were to apply the swing in the results in this by-election and apply it to other seats in Ontario, we're talking massive destruction for the Liberal Party in a federal election. And this is, so before the results, it's from CBC News here, quote, if we do end up on Monday night with 2, 3, 4, 5-point win for the Liberals will be happy to have a win, but that still means that the country is going toward a big majority government for Pier PV. Again, that's if they still won the race. It still would have been an issue if it was this close. David Coletto said he believes the Liberals need to win by 10 points or more to give Trudeau a credible path forward. And they lose the race by several points. This is a major issue for the Liberal Party. Rachel Gilmore also bringing up this point that I think is worth mentioning here. Leslie Church, the Liberal candidate, was endorsed by a Liberal MP housefather who has been, I'll get to an example in a second, but has been just absolutely terrible in the ongoing genocide in Gaza. But Rachel Gilmore writing here, I can't imagine this was super galvanizing for progressives following housefather's staunch support for Israel amid what several experts consider a genocide. So Leslie Church, happily publicizing this endorsement by housefather, who was one of only 3 liberals to vote against an NDP motion on Palestinian statehood. And at one point recently, this is in April, there was speculation that he may switch to the Conservatives. Look, you can't stop somebody from endorsing you. I guess you could if you go behind the scenes and tell them not to endorse you. But you don't necessarily have to publicize it in such a way, especially when it's somebody who is so divisive as housefather is. Now, I'm not going to pretend. I don't know this writing enough to claim this was a major factor. I don't think it was a major factor in this race. I can't imagine it was. But as Rachel Gilmore writes here, it's not going to help. Any progressives following this race who live in that riding are obviously going to be less inclined to want to come out to support Leslie Church against the Conservative when she is happily boosting endorsements like that. Now, this is where we get to Trudeau. Because this, again, if the Liberals have any hope, which I think there's sort of just a mood in the country generally that people want change. And when people get into this mode, it doesn't necessarily matter who is the leader of the party. If it's the same party they've had for a long time, they want to get them out regardless. But this is not helping the Liberals for sure. I mean, look at the increasing move toward a negative feeling of Justin Trudeau. And I also want to share this because Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, it's not like he's the reason why people are voting Conservative. He isn't that popular either. He's a +5 net score here, but it's not great at 39%. The issue is people want change. That's why they are backing Conservatives. They view the Conservative Party as the only viable option in this. Yes, it's a multi-party system, but it's first past the post. The way the system operates ends up being one of 2 choices. So you have people moving towards the Conservative Party, not because of Pierre Poilievre necessarily, but because they simply want the Liberals out. That said, I don't think it would hurt for the Liberals to change leadership. Liberals are guaranteed a loss with Trudeau as leader. They may still lose if someone else is in there, but it's worth the shot at trying to do something if they hope to, again, avoid a Conservative majority. This is where I'm just going to touch on this because I've discussed this in other videos, in dedicated videos about Pierre Poilievre, but this is a great piece from Paul Moist in Canadian Dimension. I'll link to this below the video. Pierre Poilievre, friend of the working class, the Conservative leader's populist strategy is making inroads with workers at the expense of both the Liberals and the NDP. Pierre Poilievre has been doing, to his credit, fantastic campaigning, fantastic messaging around working class issues. He has no real solutions and has a history of only supporting CEOs and massive corporations, and his entire career has been spent working against workers' rights. But if all people hear is the proper critique, that's enough for them, especially when they're already angry with the state of how things are right now. So they see an alternative. The alternative is making the right critiques. Most people don't read any further down and don't look into who Pierre Poilievre really is. And I'll at the end of this video, I'll link you to one of my previous videos discussing that, because I'm not going to retread all that information here again. But Pierre Poilievre is not a friend of the working class. I'll get to a bit of that here in a second, though. But Jenny Roth, writing in the Hub in April, spoke to this trend. Quote, many from what would have traditionally been an NDP pool of supporters, working class union members, make up Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's growing coalition. People from what is ostensibly the left-wing party, at least the more left party, the NDP, moving from the NDP to Pierre Poilievre. Just a wild swing. Again, going to how effective Pierre Poilievre's messaging has been. Max Fawcett, in a piece published in Canada's National Observer, cited the fact that collapsing Liberal support is not moving towards the NDP. In fact, he quoted Abacus data stating that, quote, 10% of those who voted NDP in 2021 now support Poilievre's Conservative Party. Fawcett also cited an early 2024 Angus Reid poll that revealed that, quote, more than one-third, 36% of NDP voters said they'd likely switch to the Liberals. So there are still more NDP voters open to the Liberal Party than maybe the Conservative Party, but the fact that there is, a double-digit support base from the NDP moving towards the Conservatives is alarming. And of course, a lot of Liberal support being lost to the Conservative Party. Now, this is just worth mentioning. I'm not going to, again, this whole piece is fantastic. I'm going to link to it below. I recommend you read the whole thing. I'm not going to quote the whole thing, but you should go read it. Give the page the views. But he also goes on to write here, the alignment with the Liberals has seen the introduction of some important, so the NDP alignment with the Liberals, as they struck a deal a couple of years ago, has seen the introduction of some important social policy gains. So $10 per day childcare has been largely popular for people that can access it. As he goes on to mention here, in major cities, there's been wait lists. Dental plan for lower income families, and to date 2 million seniors, plus the building blocks of a national pharmacare program. So these are all positive moves in the right direction, though I think it's fair to argue none of it is nearly enough for people who are struggling. On the labor front, the Liberal NDP working majority has introduced federal anti-scab legislation, which was great to see, and received unanimous all-party parliamentary approval. Because they're all afraid of the unions, even the Conservatives, because they're trying to keep up this appearance that they care about unions. And to be fair, the Liberals are also trying to keep up that appearance. So they're all going to be very attuned to the union support and union vote here. The above accomplishments, while not unimportant, have come at a big price. As I mentioned, waitlist for childcare. Most workers already have dental coverage, so the introduction of that may not impact as many voters as the party would hope, and that also applies to prescription drugs as well. So there simply hasn't been enough help as things have become more affordable. And when you're in a situation like this and you've had the same party in power for basically 10 years, about 10 years, then that's going to lead to, some angst. One last thing here. So on Pierre Poilievre, as I've already mentioned, one could spend much time and effort dissecting Poilievre's 20-year parliamentary track record and conclude correctly that he offers nothing to workers and cannot be trusted, but this does nothing to explain the populist strategy he is pursuing and why it appears to be succeeding. Stagnant incomes, soaring food costs, and out-of-touch realty costs are but a few of the issues Poilievre has seized upon. So these are all driving factors for voters right now, for obvious reasons. These are all very important issues that Poilievre is speaking to, that he has the correct critique of, doesn't have the correct solutions, and again, has a history of not caring about working class issues, and instead working with massive corporations, working with the wealthy to benefit them. But because he has this proper critique, much in the same way you could argue that Trump did, at least back in 2016, that is enough to fool a lot of people. Now, this is one of the articles I referenced in one of my videos about Pierre Poilievre's anti-elite Tories stack top council with corporate lobbyists. That, all you have to do is just look a little under the surface to see who the Conservatives are working with, who they're working with, the kind of candidates they put up, like Don Stewart in this by-election, to lift the veil on what the party actually is and who they're actually serving. So again, I'll link to this below the video if you want to read more into this, or I'll link to my video at the end here, which discusses a bit of that. But this was, for me, the greatest thing to come out of the by-election is the activist group called Longest Ballot Committee has taken responsibility for many of the independent candidates on the ballot. So they stacked the ballot with 84 candidates. And they did that because they're saying they're having fun and breaking records until the electoral reform promised is delivered. So, as mentioned here, in 2015, the liberals promised over and over again in speeches, like in their platform, this will be the last time we have first past the post, and we are going to bring in electoral reform. We're going to change the system to make it better, to represent everybody, to give proper representation to parties like other countries, largely in Europe, have. And they dropped the ball completely. That now, I could go deeper into why their excuse for that, because they did some polling and people don't actually want to have change. But you ran on this. Do you poll every single thing you campaign on after you win the election before doing it? No. But in this case, you did, because changing the system would hurt you as a party. That's the reality of what happened. So, anyone, there are so many reasons to be angry at the Liberal Party. For me, this is the biggest one, because this change would have meant so much for just democracy in Canada. And they had the power to do it. They had the mandate, and they simply didn't implement it because they knew it would have impacted them. And just showing the ballot here. So who shared this? Jonathan Malloy. So many names. I saw the full list of votes, and there's one candidate that got 0 votes. So one candidate on the list didn't even vote for themselves. Amazing. Last thing here. This is one of the few videos, or I guess many at this point, that I've done on Pier PV, but I think this is the most recent one. Canada, this is concerning. So just look this video up, or look that name up, or again, I'll link to this below the video under sources on YouTube. You can watch that video for a little more on Pier PV. This must be concerning the Liberal Party. But the longer Justin Trudeau continues as the leader of the Liberals, the longer, or the larger his ego grows, because there is no other reason for him to remain as leader when clearly the situation that the Liberals are in is dire.